Chapter 2. Lake Albano, Italy, 753 BC. Laine tried rising on her elbow and started to apologize for falling before wooziness overtook her. She lay her head down. There were times before when she'd passed out for no apparent reason during the first semester of her sophomore year in college, the year that Dad died and what she called her fainting summer. When Laine got the call about Dad's death, it was much the same feeling. She was 19, a sophomore, studying creative writing at the University of Montana. After they found her under the desk, Mom and Ashley took her back briefly to Darby. There she hardly ate anything and could only stare down at her plate. She slept with the bottomlessness of a deep well, drawn of all its water, and entered a dry, arid place. Guess the grief hadn't hit her or wouldn't hit her until later. Or maybe that's what being numb meant, or still in shock. When her term at university ended, Mom insisted she stay at her dorm and paid Laine's expenses for the summer, like their shared grief could not be tolerated under the same roof. That summer, Laine passed out everywhere, halfway up the stairs, outside on the lawn. She wasn't sure why she fainted, except maybe because of the fresh coat of paint. It felt the same way as it did now, only now when she woke up, it's like she was still in a dream. She was in that part of her subconscious that seemed to make sense, while being entirely ridiculous. When she came to, she was up above, staring at her body on the ground. That had definitely not happened before. It was strange. She could feel the sensations in her body even though she was disconnected from it. There was a pain in her right foot, and she realized she had a giant rip down the seam of one of her hookah shoes from eBay. Must have tripped on a rock. Her hand was on her stomach, her elbows skinned, her head unmoving down below. Coming to her senses, she felt someone holding her up above the ground. How was that possible, when her body was still crunched down on the trail? Was she levitating? She did not see Jerry at all, but there was someone there. He stood behind her, holding her. "Don't worry about her," the voice said, in a strange accent. "She's just resting until you return." "Return where?" Laine looked around sideways at the speaker. He had the kindest angular features and ink-drop eyes. He was almost all bald except for the white side patches of hair forming around his ears and the back of his skull. "I'm Father Ravalli," the man said. He wore one of the long brown robes that reminded Laine of St. Francis Assisi. "Shut up," Laine said. She knew the lake was named after Father Ravalli, who came there in the 1800s to the rugged Montana wilderness to set up the first missions. It was difficult to turn her head to see his face, but when she did, she thought Father Ravalli looked a little like Grandpa Bob, which allowed her to ease her tension a bit and let him hold her without struggle. Something about his watery eyes, with his respirator tank. Grandpa still smoked. She no longer saw her physical self. It was no longer lying on the trail in a state of unconsciousness. It had all but vanished. She was full of questions. Where am I? Who am I? Where does the spirit go when the body leaves it? She started to swerve her head and tried to speak. She gagged back tears of frustration, because every time she tried to speak, it was only animal noises that came out. "It's okay," he said. "Relax." Was an Italian missionary really telling her to relax? Her to relax? Her to relax? He was holding her by the crook of his elbow, like she was an oversized bundle. He shifted her, weighing out her torso and rear. Her body was completely transformed into that of an animal. Her long legs were beneath her, the ones that Dad used to say went all the way up to her butt. Where does the body go when the spirit leaves it? Where do we go when we die? Father Ravalli did not answer her, but stood facing the lake for a long time, so that she was facing it too, looking at the upside-down L on the mountain, until that too was erased, and the trees seemed to grow in thicker, like through a wind tunnel. Father Ravalli sent her gently on the ground when everything stopped moving. "I traveled a long way to come to the Bitterroot Mountains. Now you will see my beautiful land here in Italy," Father Ravalli said, "and it will heal you." "No, you're not dead," he added. "You're just separated from your physical being. Sometimes to dive into life, you have to fly high above it." "Oh my God, someone get me out of here," Laine said, and she didn't know if she meant her body or her dream. "Hadn't you wanted to come to Italy?" He let her down and Laine wriggled on the ground in her sheep form, shaking her horns like a naughty toddler, refusing to eat what was on his dinner plate. It was what she'd written on her last blog after all, a woman changing into a sheep. Maybe none of this would be happening if she hadn't written that. Now it was happening to her. She saw herself in a puddle of dirt, in the lake and in the water, her reflection, a black sheep of medium size. Was this some kind of joke? Was it because she thought herself sheepish, or had made friends with the neighbor's sheep? Why did she have to write that and make it her reality? Laine realized she was blurring with some of the characters she'd written about, or would be soon. She knew this instinctively. Past, present, future, they were all blurring, blending in the most excruciating, but refreshing way. It was all taking place in Laine's psyche, after all. While Romulus was her higher self, the one she was trying to attain, she had no idea where she'd find him. She started to walk, but tripped and smashed into the trail once more. Resting there on her haunches, Laine knew she wasn't in Montana anymore, by the humidity in the air, like she was next to a great expanse of sea. She looked down at her reflection again and saw the medium-sized black sheep with horns looking back at her. The black obtrusion that was her snout, protruding from her nose, was like one of those respirator masks. When she turned around, Father Ravalli was also gone. She stood up, her hooves clapping around her. It was forest on all sides. She definitely wasn't in Montana, and she definitely wasn't herself, but she still felt like herself. She wondered if she had had a concussion back on the trail, and that's how she entered this place. What did the priest mean when he said she had healing work to do? Did he send her to Italy and turn her into a sheep so she could heal herself? And if so, how? She was still on a type of trail, but the trees looked different. The lake had turned into dense forest. There was less squalid undergrowth and taller, vine-laden canopy trees with their high branches sharing a blanket of leafage. It felt like she was wearing lead shoes and kept trying to stand upright on her back hooves only to fall down again, learning to trust the front hooves to carry her weight. She stood in sort of a downward dog, her butt in the air, until she felt secure enough to balance her weight on her front haunches and to rise. When she was able to stand, she could take one small step, she realized, and then another. Eventually moving came naturally, except feeling small, low to the ground. She jumped at every squirrel noise and rustle in the leaves. With all the tripping and potholes and fallen logs that she had to learn how to hop over, it took her an hour before she reached a clearing. Between the trees in front of her on a grassy slope was a flock of sheep, woolly with small legs and curved horns like the ones she had, which added weight to her skull. Yet none that she saw were all black as she was. She whipped her head back and forth, getting used to her new horns. At the top of the field she saw a small rustic hut where 3 people stood on a plot of soil next to a hut. They were bent working the soil among 2 oxen. What appeared to be an older person beside 2 boys. As she got closer, she was shocked at the man in sandals, a rag over his head. "Dad?" He stood over the soil. He was walking with his hands cupped behind him, his shoulders drawn back as he dragged the rope holding the team of oxen. The oxen dug up the soil with a long grate they carried behind them. Behind the oxen, the 2 identical young men dropped seeds from a sack into the soil. The darker-haired one had curly black hair, large eyes and a nose, and hands that seemed too big for him. But he had a good nature and earnest expression, she thought. He was rather paler than his brother, who looked identical except for a darker olive skin, chiseled cheeks, and more shapely eyebrows. The brother with the wider face and shapely eyebrows was also with a denser body type and appeared more muscular. His hair was also lighter, as if bleached with lemon juice in the sun. Dad's knees were so muddy it looked like he was wearing stockings of dry red clay. Though she knew he was the Good Shepherd, the twins' adopted father, Laine swore it was Dad when he spit out a long string of what looked like chewing tobacco, and it smelled just the same, of licorice and acidity that she loved so much. She remembered Dad's salmon-colored wife-beater that he wore in the summer when planting the trees in their back acre, his beer belly above his chicken legs. His shadow looked like a bald-headed ostrich. She smelled the smoke of the burn pile, the lilac bushes, and the sound of the river shoes smashing into the irrigation ditch. The oxen struggled behind him, dragging the rake that was attached to their backs by a long piece of wood between them. As Laine got closer to the trio, an Irish collie started nipping at her hooves. She was being herded, she realized, and the dog was barking at her. "Get back in line where you belong." She tried to tell it she was different than the other sheep, but the dog wasn't buying it. "Oh my God, this is not happening. Get away," she tried to say, but the sheep noises tickled her throat, and her voice was dying, the voice she had taken for granted. Thanks for watching my video, guys. I'll be back with another video next Wednesday. Until then, ciao!